The small town of Lakeview seemed suspended in time. Nestled between ancient pine forests and the misty shores of Lake Blackwater, in this place where everyone knew their neighbor's business, Vincent Maddox had cultivated the perfect image: successful insurance broker, devoted husband, and pillar of the community. But beneath the carefully constructed facade lurked something dark and monstrous, something his wife Eleanor would discover too late. November 1987. The days grew shorter, and autumn's golden glow surrendered to winter's approaching gloom. The Maddox residence stood at the end of Oakwood Drive, a handsome two-story Victorian with pristine white columns and meticulously maintained gardens. The envy of the neighborhood, the house whispered of old money and respectability, qualities Vincent had worked tirelessly to project. Eleanor Maddox, formerly Eleanor Thornhill, had once been the town's golden girl. With her striking auburn hair and perceptive hazel eyes, she had captured Vincent's attention at a charity gala 7 years ago. Their courtship had been swift, passionate, and to outside observers perfect. But perfection, as Eleanor was learning, often concealed the most insidious flaws. "I will be home late tonight," Vincent announced over breakfast, not bothering to look up from his newspaper. His voice carried that practiced smoothness, like polished marble, cold, hard, and impenetrable. Eleanor nodded, stirring her untouched coffee. The Prescott account again. A slight tightening around Vincent's eyes was the only indication that her question had unsettled him. "Yes. Daniel needs the paperwork finalized by tomorrow." The lie hung between them, as tangible as the morning mist clinging to their garden. Eleanor had called Daniel Prescott's office yesterday. There was no urgent paperwork, no deadline. Another late night unaccounted for, another thread in the raveling tapestry of their marriage. Vincent stood, straightening his immaculate charcoal suit. At 42, he remained strikingly handsome, tall and lean, with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He leaned down to kiss Eleanor's cheek, a gesture that once sent her heart racing, but now left her cold. "Don't wait up," he said, a command disguised as consideration. The front door closed with a soft click, and Eleanor exhaled, releasing the tension that always accompanied Vincent's presence. She moved to the window, watching his black Mercedes pull out of the driveway. Only when the car disappeared around the corner did she feel she could breathe freely. Eleanor hadn't always been afraid of her husband. The changes had come gradually, almost imperceptibly, like waters slowly rising in a sealed room. First there were the unexplained absences, then the subtle criticisms, the isolation from friends and family, and finally the episodes of rage that left no physical marks but shattered her sense of safety all the same. She moved through the silent house, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. In the study, Vincent's domain, everything was meticulously organized: files arranged by date, pens aligned perfectly on the mahogany desk. Eleanor hesitated at the threshold. Vincent had made it clear that his study was private, off-limits to her. But today something propelled her forward, perhaps desperation, perhaps self-preservation. Her fingers trembled as she opened the top drawer of his desk. Nothing unusual: paper clips, stamps, business cards. The second drawer contained files labeled with client names, all familiar from Vincent's discussions of his work. But the bottom drawer was locked. Eleanor paused, listening to the house's silence, before retrieving the small key she had discovered behind a loose baseboard in their bedroom last week. The key slid into the lock, and with a soft click, the drawer opened. Inside lay a single manila folder labeled Thornhill, her maiden name. Confused, Eleanor opened it to find newspaper clippings about her parents' death 15 years ago, a tragic car accident that had left her an orphan at 17. Why would Vincent keep these? Beneath the clippings lay insurance documents, her parents' life insurance policy. Eleanor frowned. She had never seen these papers before. Her aunt had handled all the arrangements after the accident. According to these documents, her parents' policy had paid out $750,000 to their sole beneficiary, Eleanor Thornhill. Money she had never received. Heart pounding, she dug deeper, finding bank statements for an offshore account in her name, but with Vincent's signature on the transactions. The most recent withdrawal had been made just last week. $50,000 transferred to someone named Alexei Petrov. Eleanor's world tilted. Her inheritance stolen. But why would Vincent keep such incriminating evidence? Unless he never expected her to find it. Unless he believed she never would, because a cold realization washed over her. Vincent had been planning something. The distant, controlling behavior, the unexplained absences, the mysterious phone calls that ended when she entered the room. They formed a pattern she had been too frightened to acknowledge. Her phone rang, startling her so badly she dropped the folder, papers scattering across the floor. With shaking hands, she answered. "Hello, Eleanor? It's Patricia from the bank." The friendly voice of the local bank manager filled the line. "I just wanted to confirm your authorization for closing your personal savings account this morning." Eleanor's throat went dry. "I didn't close any account." A pause. "Well, your husband came in with a signed authorization form. He said you were ill and couldn't come yourself." "Patricia, I never signed anything." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "When did he say this would happen?" "The funds will be transferred tomorrow morning." "Is there a problem? Should I put a hold on this?" "Yes, please." Eleanor's mind raced. "And Patricia, don't tell Vincent I called." After hanging up, Eleanor sank into Vincent's chair, the implications crashing over her. Her husband had been systematically stealing from her for years, and now he was making his final move, emptying the last account in her name, the only money he didn't yet control. Why now? What had changed? The answer came as she gathered the scattered papers. A small, glossy photograph had fallen from the folder. It showed Vincent with his arm around a blonde woman, both smiling intimately at each other. Eleanor turned it over. Written on the back in unfamiliar handwriting, "Soon, my love, 2 more weeks." 2 weeks. The time frame sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Vincent wasn't just planning to take her money. He was planning to leave, or worse. The house phone rang again. Eleanor answered hesitantly. "Mrs. Maddox?" An unfamiliar male voice, heavily accented. "This is Alexei. Your husband promised payment today. He's not answering his phone." Eleanor's heart hammered. "What payment is this for?" A pause. "He didn't tell you?" "Special merchandise. Very hard to acquire in this country." "I see," Eleanor said, though she didn't. "How much does he owe you?" 50,000, cash only." The man's tone hardened. "Tomorrow night. Tell him no more delays or there will be consequences." The line went dead. Eleanor's hands shook as she replaced the receiver. Vincent was involved in something illegal, something that required large sums of cash and mysterious meetings, something dangerous enough that he needed to disappear with all their money. She moved quickly now, gathering the evidence and securing it in her hidden lockbox in the basement. Then she packed a small overnight bag, enough for a few days away. She had go to her friend Diane's house in the next county. Vincent had forbidden her from contacting Diane months ago, calling her a bad influence. But now Eleanor understood his real motivation. Isolation made her easier to control. As she descended the stairs, headlights swept across the front windows. Vincent's car was pulling into the driveway hours earlier than expected. Eleanor froze, clutching her bag. There was no time to hide it, no explanation she could offer for being packed and ready to leave. The front door opened, and Vincent stood silhouetted against the fading daylight, his gaze immediately fixed on the bag in her hand. "Going somewhere?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "Diane called." Eleanor lied, summoning courage from some unknown reserve. "Her mother's in the hospital. I thought I had go stay with her for a few days." Vincent stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "That's interesting, considering Diane moved to Arizona last month." He advanced toward her, each step measured and deliberate. You have been in my study. It wasn't a question. Eleanor backed away, her grip tightening on her bag. Vincent, we need to talk about what I found. And what exactly did you find, Eleanor? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Some old papers? Banking information you wouldn't understand. I understand enough. Her voice trembled, despite her effort to sound confident. You stole my inheritance. You are planning something with that woman, with Elle, and who is Alexei Petrov? What merchandise are you buying that costs $50,000? Vincent's expression changed, a flash of genuine surprise quickly masked by cold calculation. Alexia called here. When? Just now. He said no more delays. Vincent cursed under his breath, running a hand through his immaculate hair. The first sign of disorder Eleanor had seen in him for years. You have complicated things, Eleanor. This could have been simple. Simple? Anger flared through her fear. You stealing everything from me is simple. Not everything. Vincent's voice softened, almost regretful. Just the money. Just the house. Just the life we built. He sighed. It wasn't personal. Not really. It was just opportunity. You had what I needed, and then you didn't anymore. The casual cruelty of his words struck Eleanor like a physical blow. What happened to you, Vincent? Did you ever love me at all? Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps the ghost of genuine emotion. I thought I did at the beginning. You were convenient, wealthy, naive, alone in the world. Perfect, really. He stepped closer. I didn't plan for Lydia. She just happened. Lydia. Eleanor whispered the name. That's Elle. Vincent nodded. We met last year at a conference in Chicago. She understands me in ways you never could. His expression hardened. She's waiting for me. Tonight, with tickets to São Paulo. You are leaving tonight? Eleanor's mind raced. What about Alexei? Alexei will have to wait. Vincent's hand moved to his pocket. Forever, preferably. He's become a liability. Eleanor saw her chance, perhaps her only one. The bank called too. They have put a hold on the account closure. Vincent's face darkened with rage. You stupid interfering. He lunged forward, grabbing her arm with bruising force. Do you have any idea what you have done? What's at stake? Let go of me. Eleanor swung her bag, catching Vincent across the face. Startled, he released her. She bolted for the front door, but Vincent recovered quickly, tackling her to the floor. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. I didn't want it to be like this, Vincent hissed, pinning her down. This is your fault, Eleanor. All of it. His hands encircled her throat, pressing down with frightening precision. The action of someone who knew exactly how to cut off air without leaving obvious bruises. Black spots danced at the edges of Eleanor's vision as she clawed desperately at his arms. Stop fighting. Vincent's voice seemed to come from far away. It will be over soon. Through the encroaching darkness, Eleanor's gaze fixed on something metallic gleaming on the floor. Her silver letter opener, fallen from the entryway table during their struggle. With her last reserves of strength, she stretched her fingers toward it, feeling the cool metal handle just as consciousness began to slip away. In one desperate motion, she grasped the opener and swung blindly. Vincent howled as the sharp point sank into his shoulder. His grip loosened enough for Eleanor to gasp a precious breath and knee him hard in the stomach. He doubled over, and she scrambled away, still clutching the bloodied letter opener. You bitch, Vincent snarled, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. You have ruined everything. Eleanor backed toward the kitchen, never taking her eyes off him. Stay away from me, Vincent. I will call the police. He laughed, a chilling sound devoid of humor. And tell them what? That your husband of 7 years is leaving you, that he made some investments you didn't approve of. They will pat your hand and tell you it's a domestic dispute. I will tell them about the money, about Alexei, about whatever illegal merchandise you are involved with. Vincent's expression darkened. You won't get the chance. He lunged again. Eleanor turned and fled into the kitchen, slamming the door behind her and jamming a chair under the handle. It wouldn't hold him for long. She grabbed the phone on the wall, frantically. 911. What's your emergency? My husband is trying to kill me, Eleanor gasped. Please, I need help. The kitchen door splintered as Vincent kicked it, the chair skidding across the tile floor. Eleanor dropped the phone and ran for the back door, but Vincent was faster. He caught her hair, yanking her backward with such force that her neck snapped painfully. You couldn't just let me go, he growled, dragging her across the kitchen. You couldn't just die quietly. Eleanor fought wildly, kicking and scratching, but Vincent was stronger. He slammed her head against the marble countertop, and pain exploded through her skull. Dazed, she felt herself being dragged toward the cellar door. The police are coming, she mumbled through bloodied lips. They won't find anything but a tragic accident. Vincent's voice was calm again, controlled. Poor Eleanor, always so clumsy, fell down the cellar stairs and broke her neck. Such a shame. Eleanor's vision swam as Vincent opened the cellar door, revealing the steep wooden stairs descending into darkness. She knew with terrible clarity that if he got her down those stairs, she would never come back up. With one last surge of desperate strength, she twisted in his grasp and brought her knee up hard between his legs. Vincent doubled over with a strangled groan, and Eleanor broke free, stumbling toward the back door. But her head injury had left her disoriented, and she swayed, the kitchen tilting around her. Vincent recovered too quickly. Before she could reach the door, he grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all his strength. The impact against the back of her head was explosive, and Eleanor crumpled to the floor, like a marionette with cut strings. Through a haze of pain, she heard Vincent breathing heavily above her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Darkness crawled at the edges of her consciousness. I'm sorry it came to this, Vincent said, his voice oddly gentle as he knelt beside her. We could have had a good life if you had just stopped asking questions. His fingers brushed her cheek almost tenderly. Goodbye, Eleanor. The last thing she felt was Vincent's arms lifting her, carrying her toward the cellar stairs. The last thing she heard was the distant wail of sirens, too far away to save her. Then darkness claimed her completely. Vincent worked methodically, arranging Eleanor's broken body at the bottom of the cellar stairs. Her neck was bent at an unnatural angle, her limbs splayed like a discarded doll's. Perfect. A tragic accident, nothing more. He wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a smear of Eleanor's blood across his forehead. There was more blood than he had expected, pooling beneath her head where the skillet had connected. No matter. Head wounds always bled dramatically. He had cleaned up any suspicious traces. The sirens grew louder. Someone must have heard the commotion, a neighbor perhaps, or maybe Eleanor had actually connected with 911. Either way, he needed to work quickly. Vincent took one last look at his wife's still form. Such a waste. If only she hadn't discovered his plans. If only she had remained the trusting, naive woman he had married. Now Lydia would have to wait, the tickets to São Paulo forfeit, while he played the grieving widower through a perfunctory investigation. He ascended the stairs, closing the cellar door behind him. In the kitchen, he quickly wiped blood from the counter and floor, tossed the bloodied rag into the garbage disposal, and ran it until the evidence disappeared down the drain. Then he splashed water on his face, rinsing away Eleanor's blood before changing his shirt to hide the wound she had inflicted with the letter opener. The sirens stopped outside. Showtime. Vincent took a deep breath, summoning tears as he prepared to greet the police. But as he moved toward the front door, a sound froze him in place. Faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. From behind the cellar door came the soft, rattling sound of Eleanor drawing breath. She was still alive. Vincent turned slowly, staring at the closed door as if it might suddenly fly open. The doorbell rang, followed by an authoritative knock. The police had arrived, and behind that cellar door, Vincent Maddox was breathing. His perfect plan was unraveling by the second. Vincent's mind raced as another knock echoed through the house, more insistent this time. Down in the cellar, Eleanor was alive, injured, possibly dying but undeniably breathing. A complication he couldn't afford with police officers standing at his door. "Police, open up, please." Vincent composed himself, smoothing his expression into one of confusion and concern. He opened the front door to find two uniformed officers, a tall, weathered man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman whose sharp eyes immediately catalogued Vincent's appearance. "Officers," Vincent said, injecting a note of bewilderment into his voice. "Is something wrong?" The male officer stepped forward. "I'm Officer Reynolds. This is Officer Jimenez. We received a 911 call from this address. A woman reported that her husband was trying to kill her." Vincent's expression shifted to perfect incredulity. "What? There must be some mistake." He glanced behind him as if expecting to see someone else. "It's just me here. My wife went to visit a friend." Officer Jimenez's gaze hardened. "Sir, the call came from your landline less than 15 minutes ago." "That's impossible," Vincent insisted, allowing irritation to color his tone. "Look, come in if you want to, but I'm telling you there's been some kind of misunderstanding." He stepped back, allowing the officers into the foyer. Vincent's heart hammered against his ribs, but years of deception had made him an excellent performer. He maintained the precise balance of confusion and cooperation as the officers scanned the entryway. "The call disconnected abruptly," Reynolds said, studying Vincent's face. "Dispatch couldn't get a call back. Given the nature of the allegations, we had to respond." "Of course," Vincent nodded. "I understand you are just doing your job. But as you can see, everything's fine here." Officer Jimenez noticed something on the hardwood floor. A small, dark droplet. "Blood. What's this, sir?" Vincent didn't miss a beat. "I cut myself earlier chopping vegetables." He displayed a small kitchen knife wound on his index finger. "An old injury, but useful in this moment. Must have dripped without me noticing." From behind the cellar door came a faint thud, so quiet that Vincent nearly convinced himself he had imagined it. But Officer Reynolds's head turned slightly toward the kitchen. "Mind if we take a look around?" Reynolds asked, though his tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. "Be my guest," Vincent gestured, expansively, his mind calculating frantically. The cellar door was closed but not locked. If they searched thoroughly, they would find Eleanor. He needed to distract them, direct their attention elsewhere. "Actually," Vincent said suddenly, "now that I think about it, there was a strange call earlier. Some man with an accent asking for money. When I told him he had the wrong number, he became threatening. Could that be related?" This half-truth seemed to interest the officers. Reynolds made a note while Jimenez continued her visual sweep of the main floor. "Did this caller identify himself?" Reynolds asked. "Alex or Alexei, something like that," Vincent replied, watching Jimenez from the corner of his eye as she moved toward the kitchen. He seemed confused, insisted I owed him money. I hung up on him. Reynolds nodded. "We have had reports of scam calls in the area. Still doesn't explain the 911 call, though." Officer Jimenez paused at the kitchen threshold, her gaze falling on the slightly ajar cellar door. Vincent's pulse quickened. He needed to act. "If someone did call from this house," Vincent said, raising his voice slightly, "it would have to be an intruder. Maybe I should check upstairs." Another sound from the cellar, faint but distinct. A moan. Jimenez's hand moved to her weapon. "What was that?" "The water heater," Vincent said smoothly. "It's been making noises lately. I have been meaning to get it checked." "In the cellar?" Jimenez clarified, already moving toward the door. "Yes," but Vincent stepped forward. But Reynolds blocked his path with a subtle shift of his body. "Why don't we take a look?" Reynolds suggested, his casual tone belied by the alertness in his eyes. Vincent felt the situation slipping beyond his control. If they found Eleanor alive, she would reveal everything. His life, his future with Lydia, his freedom, all would vanish in an instant. Of course, he conceded, mind racing for a contingency plan. It's just a bit messy down there. I have been renovating. Officer Jimenez pulled the cellar door open wider and flipped the light switch. The naked bulb illuminated the wooden stairs descending into the basement. From their vantage point, they couldn't yet see the bottom where Eleanor lay. "After you, sir," Jimenez said, gesturing for Vincent to lead the way. Vincent hesitated, then started down the stairs, hyper-aware of the officers following close behind. His mind whirled with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. He could claim Eleanor had fallen accidentally. He could suggest she had been suicidal lately, but if she regained consciousness, if she spoke. 6 steps down, Vincent could now see Eleanor's crumpled form at the bottom of the stairs. Her position had changed slightly from how he had left her, one arm now outstretched, fingers splayed as if reaching for help. The pool of blood beneath her head had spread, dark and accusing against the concrete floor. "Jesus Christ," Reynolds breathed behind him, then pushed past Vincent, taking the remaining stairs 2 at a time. "Officer Jimenez, call an ambulance." Vincent remained frozen on the steps as Reynolds knelt beside Eleanor, checking for a pulse. The moments stretched, suspended in time. Either his wife was dead, and he might still salvage this disaster. "She's alive." "Barely." Reynolds looked up at Vincent, his expression transformed from professional detachment to barely contained fury. "What happened here?" Before Vincent could formulate a response, Jimenez was beside him, gripping his arm firmly. "Sir, I need you to come back upstairs with me while my partner attends to your wife." It wasn't a request. Vincent allowed himself to be led back to the kitchen, mind racing. The situation was salvageable. Barely. Eleanor was unconscious. She couldn't contradict his version of events yet. "I don't understand," Vincent said, infusing his voice with shock and concern. "I was upstairs when I heard a crash. I thought she had left already. She was going to visit her friend. She must have fallen." Jimenez's expression remained impassive. "Sir, when did you last see your wife before discovering her at the bottom of the stairs?" "About an hour ago," Vincent lied. "We had an argument about her leaving. I went upstairs to cool off, and I assumed she had left while I was up there." He ran his hands through his hair, the picture of a distressed husband. "I had no idea she was hurt. If I had known—" "You said earlier that your wife wasn't home," Jimenez pointed out, her voice level but accusatory. Vincent allowed his expression to crumple. I was embarrassed. We fought. I didn't want to air our dirty laundry." He looked toward the cellar with manufactured concern. "Is she going to be okay?" Before Jimenez could respond, the wail of approaching sirens filled the air. The ambulance had arrived with remarkable speed. Within minutes, the house was filled with emergency personnel, and Eleanor was being carefully stabilized on a backboard, an oxygen mask covering her bloodied face. As the paramedics carried Eleanor up the stairs, Vincent caught a glimpse of her, pale as death, but undeniably alive. Her eyelids fluttered briefly, and for one horrifying moment, Vincent thought she might regain consciousness, but she remained silent as they whisked her through the kitchen and out to the waiting ambulance. "Mr. Maddox," Officer Reynolds addressed him, his tone formal. "We will need you to come down to the station to make a statement." "The station? Now? But I should go to the hospital." "Your statement first," Reynolds insisted. "Officer Jimenez will drive you." Vincent recognized the steel beneath the request. They suspected him. Of course they did. The 911 call, the inconsistencies in his story. But suspicion wasn't evidence, and without Eleanor's testimony they had nothing concrete. "Of course," Vincent agreed, adopting a tone of confused compliance. "Whatever helps." As Jimenez escorted him to the patrol car, Vincent glanced back at his house, the perfect facade now marred by flashing lights and yellow police tape. Somewhere in the neighborhood, curtains twitched as neighbors watched the spectacle unfold. His carefully constructed image was crumbling by the second, and 20 miles away, at the regional airport, Lydia would be boarding a plane alone, wondering why he hadn't come. The Lakeview police station buzzed with quiet activity as Officer Jimenez led Vincent to a small interview room. The space was deliberately uncomfortable. Hard plastic chairs, a metal table bolted to the floor, fluorescent lights that cast everyone in a sickly pallor. Vincent recognized the tactics at play. They wanted him off balance, unsettled. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Can I get you some water, Mr. Maddox?" Jimenez asked, her politeness perfunctory. "No, thank you. I had just like to get this over with so I can go to the hospital." Vincent adjusted his posture to appear concerned, but cooperative. Jimenez nodded and left him alone in the room. Through the small window in the door, Vincent watched her confer with Reynolds in the hallway. Their body language suggested disagreement, Reynolds gesturing emphatically while Jimenez shook her head. Finally, the door opened and Reynolds entered, carrying a thin folder. He sat across from Vincent, spreading photographs on the table between them, crime scene photos, taken hastily before they had left the house. The kitchen with its knocked-over chair, the blood smears Vincent had failed to completely clean, the cellar stairs with Eleanor's blood pooled at the bottom. "Mr. Maddox," Reynolds began, his voice neutral. "We received a 911 call from your residence at 6:17 p.m. The caller identified herself as Eleanor Maddox and stated that her husband was trying to kill her. The call disconnected abruptly. When we arrived, you told us your wife wasn't home. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Vincent had anticipated this question. "As I told Officer Jimenez, I was embarrassed. Eleanor and I had an argument. She was planning to visit her friend, and I assumed she had left. I didn't know she was injured in the cellar." "What was the argument about?" Reynolds pressed. "Money, mainly." Another partial truth. "Eleanor wanted access to accounts I manage. I suggested we discuss it later, and she became upset." Reynolds studied him, his expression unreadable. "Your wife has a significant head injury, Mr. Maddox." The paramedics noted multiple contusions, inconsistent with a simple fall down the stairs. Vincent felt sweat beading at his hairline, but maintained his composure. "I don't know what to tell you. I wasn't there when she fell. Maybe she hit the railing on the way down. There's also the matter of bruising around her throat," Reynolds continued, watching Vincent closely. "Recent bruising, according to the paramedics." For a fraction of a second, Vincent faltered. He hadn't anticipated the throat bruises being so immediately apparent. I don't know anything about that." "Mr. Maddox, where were you planning to go tonight?" The abrupt change in questioning caught Vincent off guard. "What do you mean?" Reynolds slid another photograph across the table. Vincent's overnight bag, which he had left by the front door in his haste to deal with Eleanor. "You were packed for a trip." "Business in Chicago." Vincent recovered quickly. "I was leaving tomorrow morning. Early flight." "Interesting." Reynolds made a note. "Because we found a plane ticket in your jacket pocket to São Paulo. For tonight." Vincent's blood ran cold. How could he have been so careless? The ticket should have been in his briefcase, not his pocket. He had transferred it while changing his shirt and forgotten, in the chaos that followed. "I can explain that." "I'm sure you can," Reynolds interrupted. "Just as I'm sure you can explain the $50,000 in cash we found in your briefcase." Vincent's mind raced. The evidence was mounting, but it was all circumstantial. Without Eleanor's testimony, they couldn't prove intent. A troubled marriage, yes. Financial impropriety, possibly. But attempted murder? They had need more. "Am I under arrest, Officer Reynolds?" Vincent asked, his voice steady despite the panic churning in his gut. Reynolds held his gaze for a long moment. "Not at this time, Mr. Maddox, but I wouldn't leave town if I were you. We will have more questions once your wife regains consciousness." The implication was clear. They were waiting for Eleanor to wake up and tell her side of the story. Vincent's freedom hung by the slenderest of threads, dependent entirely on Eleanor's continued silence. "Now," Reynolds continued, "tell me about Alexei Petrov." Vincent's composure slipped. "I don't know who that is." "Really? Because we found several notes in your study mentioning payments to an AP, and your phone records show multiple calls to a number registered to Alexei Petrov over the past 3 months. I speak with many clients." "Is Mr. Petrov a client?" Reynolds pressed. "Because our records indicate he's a person of interest in several investigations involving illegal weapons smuggling." Vincent felt the noose tightening. Somehow, in the span of a few hours, his carefully constructed life had disintegrated completely. "I think I'd like to speak with an attorney now." Reynolds nodded, unsurprised. "That's your right." He gathered the photographs, returning them to the folder. "Officer Jimenez will process your release paperwork. As I said, don't leave town." Vincent was escorted to the station's waiting area, where he called the only attorney he knew who handled criminal cases. Thomas Westfield, a golf buddy who specialized in white-collar crime. Thomas agreed to meet him at the hospital, his voice tight with unasked questions. As Vincent waited for his release paperwork, his thoughts turned to Eleanor. If, when she regained consciousness, everything would unravel. She knew too much about the money, about Lydia, about his dealings with Alexei. He needed to reach her before she could talk to the police. But how? They would certainly have officers posted at her hospital room. They would be watching him, waiting for him to make a suspicious move. He needed to be careful, calculating. He needed a plan. Officer Jimenez approached with his personal effects: wallet, keys, phone. The cash and plane ticket remained in police custody as potential evidence. "You are free to go, Mr. Maddox," she said, her tone making it clear she disagreed with this decision. "Your wife has been taken to Memorial Hospital. They have been notified you may be coming." Vincent nodded his thanks, pocketing his belongings. As he turned to leave, Jimenez added, "Mr. Maddox, for what it's worth, I hope your wife recovers quickly. I'm sure she will have quite a story to tell." The implicit threat wasn't lost on Vincent. He maintained his concerned husband facade until he reached his car in the station's parking lot. Only then did he allow his mask to slip, pounding the steering wheel in frustrated rage. Everything was falling apart. Lydia would be halfway to Brazil by now, assuming he had abandoned their plans. The money for Alexei was in police custody, which meant the volatile Russian would soon be looking for him, demanding payment or blood. And Eleanor, the woman he had tried to kill, lay in a hospital bed with the power to destroy him completely. Vincent started the car, his mind clearing as the initial panic subsided. He wasn't finished yet. He still had resources, connections, options. This setback was severe but not insurmountable. First, he needed to assess Eleanor's condition. If she remained unconscious, he might have time to formulate a contingency plan. If she was awake and talking, well, he would cross that bridge when he came to it. Vincent drove to Memorial Hospital, rehearsing his concerned husband routine. The hospital's emergency entrance was brightly lit against the gathering darkness, medical personnel moving with practiced efficiency through the sliding glass doors. Vincent parked and entered, approaching the information desk with an expression of worried determination. "I'm looking for my wife," he told the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with sympathetic eyes, Eleanor Maddox. She was brought in with a head injury. The woman consulted her computer. "Yes, Mrs. Maddox is in the intensive care unit on the 3rd floor. Are you her husband?" Vincent nodded, producing his ID. Vincent Maddox. The receptionist made a note in the system. "The ICU has restricted visiting hours, but they make exceptions for immediate family. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor and check in at the nurses' station." "Thank you." Vincent turned toward the elevators, then hesitated. "Do you know her condition? Is she conscious?" "I'm afraid I don't have that information, sir. The doctors upstairs will be able to tell you more." Vincent rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. tension building with each passing second. The ICU waiting area was sparsely populated. A few anxious family members clutching foam cups of terrible coffee, their faces etched with worry. At the nurse's station, a harried-looking nurse glanced up as Vincent approached. "I'm here to see Eleanor Maddox," he said. "I'm her husband." The nurse's expression shifted subtly. "Mr. Maddox, yes, we have been expecting you. Let me get Dr. Ramirez." Vincent waited, scanning the corridor for police presence. There, at the far end of the hallway, a uniformed officer sat outside a room, thumbing through a magazine. Eleanor's guard, undoubted. "Mr. Maddox?" A tall woman in a white coat approached, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. I have been treating your wife since she arrived." Vincent shook her hand, noting the coolness in her eyes. The police had obviously shared their suspicions with the medical staff. "How is she, doctor?" Dr. Ramirez gestured to a small consultation room off the main corridor. "Let's talk privately." Once inside, she closed the door and turned to face him, clinical detachment evident in her posture. "Your wife has suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. There's significant swelling, and we have placed her in a medically induced coma to give her brain time to heal." "A coma?" Vincent struggled to mask his relief. "For how long?" "That depends on how she responds to treatment. Could be days, could be weeks." Dr. Ramirez studied him carefully. "She also has a fractured clavicle, 4 broken ribs, and significant bruising around her throat and torso." Vincent recognized the accusation beneath the clinical assessment. "Will she recover fully?" "It's too early to say. Brain injuries are unpredictable. She might wake up tomorrow with minimal lasting effects, or she might—" Dr. Ramirez let the sentence hang unfinished. "Can I see her?" Vincent asked, injecting the appropriate amount of concern into his voice. The doctor hesitated. Briefly, "She won't be conscious and visiting hours end in 20 minutes. She led Vincent down the corridor to Eleanor's room, past the officer who straightened as they approached. Inside, machines beeped steadily, monitoring every aspect of Eleanor's condition. She lay pale and still beneath the hospital blankets, her head bandaged, her face mottled with bruises. An intubation tube snaked from her mouth, breathing for her. Vincent stared at his wife's broken body, a complicated mix of emotions churning within him. There was relief, certainly. Her unconscious state bought him precious time. But there was something else too, something he hadn't anticipated. Regret, perhaps not for his actions, but for the necessity of them. Eleanor had been a good wife in her way, trusting, devoted. It wasn't her fault she had become an obstacle to his ambitions. "I will leave you alone with her," Dr. Ramirez said, moving toward the door. 15 minutes, Mr. Maddox." When the doctor had gone, Vincent moved closer to Eleanor's bedside. The steady beep of the heart monitor confirmed what he could see. She was alive but completely helpless, vulnerable. He glanced toward the door. The officer remained outside, visible through the small window but unable to hear anything said within the room. The corridor beyond was quiet, the night shift settling in. Vincent leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "You have complicated things, Eleanor," he whispered. "But don't worry. I will make sure you never wake up to tell your side of the story." He straightened, adjusting his expression to one of grief, as a nurse entered to check Eleanor's vitals. His mind was already racing ahead, formulating a new plan. Eleanor's medically induced coma presented an opportunity. Hospitals were full of medications, equipment that could fail, treatments that could go wrong. If he was careful, if he was patient, he could ensure Eleanor Maddox never regained consciousness. And if he succeeded, the police would have nothing but circumstantial evidence and suspicion, not enough to convict him, not enough to prevent him from starting over somewhere new. Without Lydia, without the money from Eleanor's inheritance, but free. As Vincent left the hospital, nodding solemnly to the officer posted outside Eleanor's room, his phone vibrated in his pocket. An unknown number. Vincent answered cautiously as he walked to his car. "Mr. Maddox." Alexei's accented voice filled the line. "You missed our appointment." Vincent's blood ran cold. There were complications. The police have the money. A long silence followed. "This is unfortunate for both of us." "I need more time," Vincent said, keeping his voice low as he reached his car. "A few days at most." "Time is luxury you don't have," Alexei replied. "But perhaps we can help each other. I understand your wife is in hospital." Vincent froze, key in the ignition. "How do you know that?" "I know many things, Mr. Maddox, including that your wife's testimony could be very damaging to you." A pause. "And to me." "What are you suggesting?" "An arrangement. I help solve your problem. You find my money, plus interest, of course." Vincent considered the implications. Working with Alexei was dangerous. The man was unpredictable, violent, but he was also resourceful, connected, and right now Vincent needed both those qualities. "I'm listening," Vincent said, starting the car. "Good," Alexei replied. "Meet me tomorrow. Same place as before. We discuss details then." The line went dead. Vincent pulled out of the hospital parking lot, mind racing with possibilities. This new alliance was risky, but it offered a path forward. If Alexei could help ensure Eleanor's permanent silence, Vincent might yet salvage something from this disaster. As he drove home through the darkened streets of Lakeview, Vincent found himself smiling. The game wasn't over. It had simply entered a new, more dangerous phase, and Vincent Maddox had always thrived on danger. Sleep eluded Vincent that night. He prowled through the silent house like a caged predator, acutely aware of the police cruiser parked discreetly across the street. They were watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, it sharpened his focus to a razor's edge. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. Vincent showered and dressed meticulously, charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, subdued tie. The appearance of normality was crucial now. He made coffee, ate a light breakfast, and reviewed patient privacy laws on his laptop. If he couldn't access Eleanor directly, he needed to understand what information he was legally entitled to as her husband. At precisely 10 a.m., Thomas Westfield, Vincent's attorney, arrived. The man was everything Vincent was not: short, rotund, perpetually disheveled, but his rumpled appearance belied one of the sharpest legal minds in the state. "This is a mess, Vince," Thomas said without preamble, settling his considerable bulk into a kitchen chair. "The police have enough for a search warrant. They will be back, and they will be thorough." Vincent poured coffee for his attorney. "What exactly are they looking for?" "Evidence that contradicts your story. Signs of a struggle. Anything that suggests premeditation." Thomas sipped his coffee, grimacing at the strength. "The DA is circling. He thinks you tried to kill your wife. And frankly, the evidence doesn't look good." "It's all circumstantial," Vincent countered. "They have no proof I was even in the cellar when Eleanor fell." Thomas leveled a knowing gaze at him. "Was it an accident, Vince?" Vincent maintained perfect eye contact. "Of course it was. We argued. I went upstairs. She must have gone to the cellar and fallen. It's tragic, but it's not criminal." "Then explain the 50 grand in cash and the ticket to Brazil." "Business opportunity," Vincent replied smoothly. "I was considering investing in a coffee plantation. The owner preferred cash, and I wanted to see the operation myself before committing." Thomas sighed heavily. "And your wife's not—" "Eleanor has been emotionally unstable lately. Paranoid, imagining threats where none exist." Vincent allowed concern to color his expression. "I have been worried about her mental health for months." "That's your defense? Your wife is crazy?" Thomas shook his head. "The police won't buy it, and neither will a jury. Not with her injuries." "What are my options?" Thomas leaned forward. "Cooperate fully. Express concern for Eleanor. Don't leave town. Don't contact witnesses. Don't do anything suspicious. He fixed Vincent with a meaningful stare. "And for God's sake, don't go near the hospital except during normal visiting hours, with hospital staff present." Vincent nodded, the picture of compliance. "Of course. I just want Eleanor to recover." Thomas didn't look convinced. "I have arranged bail in advance, should it come to that. The police will continue gathering evidence while Eleanor is unconscious. If, when she wakes up, her statement will be crucial." After Thomas left, Vincent checked his watch. Noon. 4 hours until his meeting with Alexei at an abandoned boathouse on Lake Blackwater's northern shore. The location was remote enough to ensure privacy but close enough to town that neither man would feel trapped. Vincent spent the afternoon preparing. He withdrew $10,000 from a secondary account the police didn't know about, a down payment for Alexei's assistance. He researched hospital security protocols and staff rotations at Memorial. He drafted a power of attorney document, granting himself complete control over Eleanor's medical decisions, a necessary precaution if his plan proceeded. At 3:30 p.m., Vincent left his house, noting with satisfaction that the police cruiser pulled away from the curb to follow him. Let them track him. The tale was expected, even useful. It would establish his whereabouts when he eventually slipped away. Vincent drove to Memorial Hospital, parking prominently near the entrance. Inside, he signed the visitor log with a flourish, making sure the receptionist remembered him. He took the elevator to the ICU, where the same officer from the previous night sat outside Eleanor's room, now replaced by a younger colleague. Mr. Maddox, the nurse at the station, greeted him, her tone neutral. "Dr. Ramirez left instructions that you are permitted 15 minutes with your wife." Vincent nodded gratefully. "Has there been any change in her condition?" "She's stable," the nurse replied. "Dr. Ramirez will be making rounds at 5 if you had like to speak with her." Inside the room, Eleanor remained as he had left her, pale, still, surrounded by machines that monitored her tenuous hold on life. Vincent sat beside her bed, aware of the officer watching through the window in the door. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, pitching his voice to Carrie. "I'm here, darling. The doctors say you are stable." "That's good news." He reached for her limp hand, enfolding it in his own. To any observer, the picture was clear, a devoted husband, comforting his injured wife. Only Vincent knew the calculation behind every gesture, every word. For 15 minutes he maintained the charade, speaking softly to Eleanor about meaningless topics: the weather, hospital food, neighbors' concern. At exactly the 15-minute mark, the nurse returned to escort him out. "Dr. Ramirez will be here soon if you had like to wait in the visitor's lounge," she suggested. Vincent checked his watch with apparent reluctance. "I have an appointment with Eleanor's insurance company at 4:30. Please tell Dr. Ramirez I will call tomorrow for an update." He left the hospital, aware of the officer noting his departure time. The police tail picked him up again in the parking lot, following at a discreet distance as Vincent drove to the Lakeview insurance building, where he kept his office. The building's underground parking garage was Vincent's first opportunity. He parked in his reserved space, took the elevator to his office floor, and greeted his secretary with practiced normality. "Any messages, Janet?" The older woman handed him a small stack of pink message slips. "Everyone's heard about Eleanor. Is she improving?" "Stable," Vincent replied, infusing his voice with appropriate concern. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic." Inside his private office, Vincent closed the blinds and quickly sorted through the messages. Nothing from Lydia. Had she given up on him already? The thought stung more than he had expected. At precisely 4:30, Vincent picked up his office phone and dialed his own home number, letting it ring through to the answering machine. "Janet," he called through the door, "I need to step out for a client meeting. If anyone needs me, I will have my pager." He exited through his office's private door, which opened onto a service corridor used by maintenance staff. The corridor led to a secondary stairwell that emerged behind the building, where delivery trucks unloaded office supplies. Vincent had discovered this route years ago during a brief affair with a colleague's wife, a convenient means of entering and exiting unobserved. Vincent slipped into a waiting taxi, confident he had shed his police tail. "North Shore Marina," he instructed the driver, "and there's an extra 20 if you avoid the main roads." The driver, a grizzled man who looked like he had seen everything, simply nodded and pulled away from the curb. 20 minutes later, Vincent paid the taxi and watched it depart before continuing on foot along the lakeshore. The boathouse stood a quarter-mile from the marina, partially hidden by a stand of pine trees, a dilapidated structure abandoned when the property owner died intestate 10 years ago. Vincent approached cautiously, scanning for signs that someone had followed him. Nothing moved in the lengthening shadows except birds settling in for the evening. At the boathouse door he paused, listening. From inside came the faint sound of movement. "Come in, Mr. Maddox," Alexei's accented voice called. "You are not followed." Vincent pushed open the weathered door. The interior was dim, smelling of mildew and old motor oil. Alexei sat on an upturned crate, cleaning his fingernails with a hunting knife. The Russian was younger than his voice suggested, perhaps 35, with close-cropped blonde hair and the compact muscularity of a career soldier. "You are taking a risk meeting me," Vincent said, remaining near the door. "The police know your name." Alexei shrugged. "Police always know my name. They never know where to find me." He studied Vincent with cold blue eyes. "You brought money." Vincent produced the envelope containing $10,000. "A down payment. The rest when the job is complete." Alexei didn't reach for the envelope. "First, we discuss what you want." "Exactly. I need to ensure my wife never regains consciousness," Vincent stated flatly. "No signs of foul play, nothing that would trigger an investigation. And police guard her room. One officer, rotating shifts. Hospital staff present during visiting hours. Security cameras in hallways, but not in patient rooms." Alexei nodded thoughtfully. "Medical equipment can fail. Patients can have unexpected reactions to medication." He extended his hand for the envelope. "I know people at hospital, cleaning staff, orderlies, people who need money, ask no questions." Vincent handed over the cash. "How soon?" 3 days. Maybe 4. Must seem natural." Alexei pocketed the envelope. "When it's done, you bring remaining 40,000 to this location." He handed Vincent a slip of paper with an address scribbled on it. "If you don't come, I find you. This you don't want." The threat hung in the air between them. Vincent maintained a neutral expression, though his pulse quickened. Dealing with Alexei was like handling nitroglycerin, necessary but extraordinarily dangerous. 3 days, Vincent confirmed. "No traces." Alexei's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now go. Return to your life husband who grieves. Be visible. Create alibi." Vincent left the boathouse, already calculating his next moves. He needed to re-establish contact with his police tail, to be seen in public places during the window when Eleanor would suffer her complication. He needed witnesses, sympathy, the collective shield of a community rallying around a man facing tragic circumstances. As he walked back toward the marina, Vincent's phone vibrated in his pocket. "Unknown number," he answered cautiously. "Vincent." Lydia's voice, taut with anger and something else, fear. "What happened?" "I waited at the airport for hours." Relief washed through him, followed immediately by weariness. Was this call being monitored? "Lydia, I'm sorry. There was an accident. Eleanor fell down the stairs. She's in the hospital." A long pause. "Is she dead?" "No." "Cambo." Vincent kept his responses clipped, ambiguous. "The police are involved. I couldn't call earlier." "The police?" Alarm sharpened Lydia's tone. "Vincent, what aren't you telling me?" "I can't talk now. They might be listening." "Are you in danger? Should I come back?" "No," Vincent said quickly. "Stay where you are. I will contact you when it's safe." He lowered his voice. "Do you still have access to the account I set up?" Yes, but use it if you need to. I will join you as soon as I can. Vincent heard voices approaching along the marina dock. I have to go. Don't call this number again. He ended the call as a group of fishermen rounded the corner, nodding to them casually as he passed. Vincent flagged down a taxi at the marina entrance, instructing the driver to take him to a restaurant near his office building, a place where he was known, where his presence would be noted and remembered. The following morning brought a search warrant, as Thomas had predicted. Vincent watched with manufactured concern as officers meticulously examined every inch of his home, photographing the cellar stairs, taking samples from drains, removing items for further testing. Officer Reynolds supervised with grim determination, while Officer Jimenez catalogued each piece of potential evidence with precise efficiency. How much longer will this take? Vincent asked, the picture of inconvenienced cooperation. I had like to visit Eleanor this afternoon. Reynolds barely glanced at him. As long as necessary, Mr. Maddox. I suggest you make yourself comfortable. By mid-afternoon, the officers had filled several evidence boxes and taken dozens of photographs. Vincent maintained his composure throughout, answering questions with the right balance of helpfulness and growing impatience. When they finally departed, he called Thomas immediately. They took her laptop, Vincent reported, and files from my study, financial records, mostly. Expected, Thomas replied. They are building a case for financial motive. How did Eleanor's hospital visit go yesterday? Vincent hesitated. I didn't go today. The search took too long. Go tomorrow, Thomas advised. Be the concerned husband. The hospital staff will be witnesses either for or against you, depending on your behavior. After hanging up, Vincent poured himself a scotch and settled in his study, mind racing with calculations and contingencies. Alexei would need 3 to 4 days to arrange Eleanor's complication. During that time, Vincent needed to strengthen his alibi, prepare for questions that would follow her death, and secure what funds remained beyond police scrutiny. His computer chimed with an email notification. The sender's address was unfamiliar, but the subject line froze his blood. I know what you did to Eleanor. Vincent opened the email with trembling fingers. I saw you follow her to the cellar. I heard her screams. I have proof. $100,000 wired to the enclosed account number, or I go to the police. You have 48 hours. The message was unsigned. Vincent stared at the screen, mind whirling. A neighbor? Someone passing by? Or a bluff? A shot in the dark from someone who had heard about Eleanor's accident and saw an opportunity for extortion. Either way, it was a complication he couldn't afford. Not with the police already suspicious, not with $40,000 still owed to Alexei, not with his remaining liquid assets under scrutiny. Vincent deleted the email and emptied his trash folder, though he knew this would do little to remove the evidence from the server. If the police obtained a warrant for his email records, they would find it, another tightening of the noose. He needed to identify the sender, determine if their threat was credible, neutralize them if necessary. But how? The email came from a generic Gmail account impossible to trace without technical expertise Vincent didn't possess. His phone rang. The hospital. Mr. Maddox, this is Dr. Ramirez. There's been a development with your wife's condition. Could you come to the hospital? Vincent's heart raced. What kind of development? Is she worse? I had preferred to discuss this in person. How soon can you get here? 20 minutes, Vincent promised, already reaching for his keys. The drive to Memorial Hospital was a blur of anxiety and calculation. Had Eleanor shown signs of consciousness? Had Alexei moved too quickly, aroused suspicion? Or was this an elaborate trap set by Reynolds and Jimenez, using Dr. Ramirez as bait? The hospital parking lot was less crowded in the evening hours. Vincent hurried through the main entrance, noting the absence of Officer Reynolds or Jimenez in the lobby. At the elevator, he pressed the button for the ICU, rehearsing responses to various scenarios. Dr. Ramirez was waiting at the nurse's station, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Maddox, thank you for coming quickly." "What's happened?" Vincent asked, injecting concern into his voice. "Let's speak privately." She led him to the same consultation room as before, closing the door before turning to face him. "We have reduced Eleanor's sedation slightly to assess her neurological function, and she's showing increased brain activity." Vincent's mouth went dry. "Is she waking up?" "Not yet, but it's a positive sign. Her intracranial pressure has decreased, which means the swelling is subsiding." Dr. Ramirez studied him carefully. "If this trend continues, we may be able to bring her out of the induced coma sooner than expected." "How soon?" Vincent struggled to mask his alarm. "Possibly within the next 48 hours, though that's an optimistic estimate. Even then, we can't predict her level of awareness or whether she will be able to communicate immediately." 48 hours. Before Alexei's plan could be implemented. Before Vincent could secure the remaining money for the blackmailer. Everything was accelerating beyond his control. "That's wonderful news," Vincent managed, forcing a smile. "Can I see her?" Dr. Ramirez nodded, briefly. "There's something else you should know. The police have requested that I notify them immediately when Eleanor regains consciousness. They want to question her as soon as medically feasible." Of course they did. Vincent maintained his composure with supreme effort. "I understand. They are just doing their job." Eleanor's room was dimly lit, the machinery surrounding her bed emitting the same steady beeps and hums as before. But something had changed. Her face seemed less slack, her color slightly improved, and there was a uniformed officer Vincent didn't recognize, seated inside the room rather than in the hallway. "New security measures?" Vincent asked Dr. Ramirez, nodding toward the officer. "Detective Reynolds's request," she confirmed. "Given the circumstances of Eleanor's injuries." Vincent approached the bed, aware of the officer's watchful gaze. Eleanor's eyelids fluttered slightly, an involuntary movement or something more. He took her hand, leaning close. "I'm here, Eleanor," he said softly. "The doctors say you are improving." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Eleanor's fingers twitched against his palm. A tiny movement, barely perceptible but deliberate. Vincent froze, his blood running cold. She could hear him. On some level, Eleanor was aware of his presence. He straightened, carefully maintaining his expression of concerned devotion. "That's wonderful." She moved her fingers. Dr. Ramirez stepped closer, checking the monitors. "Encouraging, but not unusual with reduced sedation. It doesn't necessarily indicate consciousness." But Vincent knew better. He had felt the specific pressure of Eleanor's fingers, not a random spasm but a reaction to his voice. She was in there, fighting her way back to consciousness, back to a point where she could tell her story. Vincent's mind raced. He needed to accelerate Alexei's timeline, but how? The Russian had been clear about his methodical approach. Rushing would increase the risk of detection, but waiting was no longer an option. "When will you know more about her prognosis?" Vincent asked Dr. Ramirez. "We will conduct more neurological assessments tomorrow morning. If the positive trends continue, we will further reduce her sedation." "Tomorrow? Too soon?" Vincent nodded, squeezing Eleanor's hand one last time before releasing it. "I will be back first thing in the morning. Please call me if there's any change overnight." In the hospital parking lot, Vincent sat in his car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The walls were closing in from all sides. Eleanor's improving condition, the blackmailer's deadline, Alexei's timeline, the police investigation. He needed to act decisively, immediately. Vincent drove to a gas station with a payphone, parking at the far end of the lot, where security cameras wouldn't catch his face clearly. He dialed Alexei's number from memory, praying the Russian would answer. "Yes," Alexei's voice was cautious. "It's me. The timeline has changed. They are reducing her sedation. She could wake up tomorrow." A long pause. "This complicates matters. Can you move faster tonight?" "Tonight is risky. More staff. More witnesses." I don't have a choice, Vincent hissed. If she wakes up, it's over for both of us. Another pause. Longer this time. It will cost more. Double. Fine. Whatever you need, just make it happen. Return to hospital in 1 hour, Alexei instructed. Be visible. Speak with staff. Create alibi. Then leave. Do not return until morning. Vincent agreed and hung up, his heart pounding. He was committing fully now. No plausible deniability, no possibility of claiming ignorance. If Alexei's plan failed, if anything linked back to Vincent, he would face not just attempted murder charges, but premeditated murder. He drove to a diner near the hospital, ordering coffee and pie he couldn't stomach. The waitress recognized him from news reports about Eleanor's accident, offering sympathetic platitudes that Vincent acknowledged with appropriate gratitude. Witnesses placing him here, away from the hospital, when whatever Alexei planned took place. After an hour, Vincent paid his bill and drove back to Memorial. In the ICU, a different nurse greeted him. Shift change as expected. The same officer remained posted in Eleanor's room, looking bored but alert. I forgot to ask Dr. Ramirez something, Vincent explained to the nurse. Is she still here? She left about 20 minutes ago, but she will be back in the morning. Can I help with anything? Vincent manufactured a question about Eleanor's insurance coverage, engaging the nurse in conversation while scanning the area for any sign of Alexei or his associates. Nothing seemed out of place. No unfamiliar orderlies, no maintenance workers, no one who didn't belong. Had Alexei abandoned the plan? Or was his operative so seamlessly integrated into the hospital environment that even Vincent couldn't identify them? After 15 minutes of visible presence, Vincent thanked the nurse and departed, driving home with the weight of uncertainty crushing his chest. He had done all he could. The rest was in Alexei's hands. At home, Vincent poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and waited by the phone, jumping at every sound. Midnight came and went. No call from the hospital, no word from Alexei. The silence was excruciating. At 1:37 a.m., Vincent's phone finally rang. Mr. Maddox, an unfamiliar voice, professional but grave. This is Night Supervisor Kellerman from Memorial Hospital. There's been an incident involving your wife. You need to come immediately. Vincent's hand tightened around the phone. What kind of incident? I'm afraid there's been an unexpected complication. Dr. Ramirez has been called in. She will explain everything when you arrive. Is Eleanor? Is she alive? Vincent held his breath. Yes, sir, but her condition is critical. Please come as soon as possible. Vincent hung up, a complex mixture of emotions churning within him. Relief, anxiety, anticipation. Alexei had acted, but what exactly had he done? And had he succeeded in making it appear natural, unavoidable? As Vincent grabbed his keys and headed for the door, his phone rang again. Unknown number. The job is done, Alexei said without preamble. Payment tomorrow. Same location. What did you do? Vincent demanded. They say she's still alive. For now, but she will not wake up. Not ever. Alexei's voice was coldly confident. Go to hospital. Be grieving husband. No one will suspect. The line went dead. Vincent stood in his foyer, keys in hand, facing the most crucial performance of his life. If he succeeded, if he convinced the medical staff, the police, the community that he was devastated by this tragic turn of events, he might yet escape the trap closing around him. But as he opened the front door, Vincent found himself face to face with Officer Jimenez, her hand raised to knock. Mr. Maddox, she said, her expression grimly triumphant. I need you to come with me to the station. Behind her stood Officer Reynolds and 2 additional uniformed officers. Beyond them, the quiet street was bathed in the red and blue lights of police cruisers. What is this about? Vincent asked, though a sickening certainty was already forming in his gut. I just got a call from the hospital. Your wife is fine, Mr. Maddox, Jimenez interrupted. There was no complication. That call came from one of our officers. I don't understand, Vincent said, desperately clinging to his last shreds of deniability. Reynolds stepped forward. We have arrested an orderly attempting to tamper with your wife's medication. He's been very cooperative, especially after we offered to reduce his charges in exchange for information about who hired him. This is absurd, Vincent protested. I had nothing to do with— Save it for your lawyer, Mr. Maddox. Reynolds cut him off, producing handcuffs. Vincent Maddox, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and a list of other charges I will enjoy reading to you at the station. You have the right to remain silent. As the officers led him to the waiting police car, Vincent's mind reeled with the implications. Alexei had failed. Worse, he had been caught, turned informant. The carefully constructed web of lies was collapsing completely, and somewhere in Memorial Hospital, Eleanor Maddox continued her slow journey back to consciousness and justice. The Lakeview County Detention Center hummed with fluorescent efficiency. As Vincent sat in an interrogation room, the metal table cooled beneath his trembling hands. 18 hours had passed since his arrest. 18 hours of processing, fingerprinting, a humiliating strip search, and a night in a holding cell that reeked of desperation and industrial disinfectant. Thomas Westfield sat beside him, briefcase open, looking more disheveled than usual. The attorney's expression conveyed what words couldn't. Vincent's situation was dire. They have Alexei Petrov in custody, Thomas said, voice low despite the presumed privacy of the attorney-client meeting. He's talking, extensively. Vincent stared at a coffee stain on the table. He's lying. He has text messages, Vincent, voice recordings, a detailed account of your meetings. Thomas leaned closer, and the orderly they caught tampering with Eleanor's IV has identified you from a photo lineup. The walls of Vincent's carefully constructed reality continued to crumble. What are my options? Thomas sighed heavily. Limited. The DA is charging you with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, fraud, and about a dozen lesser charges. They are building a solid case, and frankly, it doesn't look good. Eleanor hasn't regained consciousness, Vincent pointed out. Without her testimony— They don't need her testimony anymore, Thomas interrupted. Between Alexei, the orderly, and the evidence from your home and office, they have enough for an indictment. Vincent processed this information with clinical detachment, his mind already calculating angles, escape routes, bail. The judge denied it this morning. You are considered a flight risk. Thomas closed his briefcase with a definitive snap. There's something else. The police searched your offshore accounts based on information from Alexei. They have found transaction records linking you to the deaths of Eleanor's parents 15 years ago. Vincent's blood ran cold. That's absurd, is it? Thomas studied him, seeing his client clearly for perhaps the first time. Because the police have statements from a mechanic who claims he was paid to tamper with their car's brake lines. The payment came from an account they have traced back to you. Circumstantial, Vincent insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The mechanic picked you out of a lineup, Vincent. He remembers you clearly, says you were very specific about making it look like an accident. Vincent fell silent, the magnitude of his situation finally penetrating his calculated composure. His elaborate house of cards hadn't just collapsed. It had been systematically demolished, each supporting lie extracted and exposed to harsh light. I need you to be straight with me, Thomas said, lowering his voice further. Did you arrange the deaths of Eleanor's parents to get access to her inheritance? Vincent met his attorney's gaze, weighing his options. Thomas was bound by attorney-client privilege, but even that had limits. Would your defense strategy change depending on my answer? Thomas's expression hardened. I will continue representing you regardless, but I need to know what I'm dealing with. No more surprises. Before Vincent could respond, the door opened, and Detective Reynolds entered, followed by a woman Vincent didn't recognize, tall with sharp features and the unmistakable bearing of a federal agent. "Interviews over," Reynolds announced. "Mr. Maddox is being transferred to federal custody." Thomas stood, indignant. "On what grounds? My client hasn't been formally charged in federal court." The woman stepped forward, presenting identification. "Special Agent Diana Harlow, FBI. Mr. Maddox's activities cross state lines and involve international financial transactions. That makes it our jurisdiction." Vincent felt the last threads of control slipping away. The FBI meant resources beyond local police, investigations that could uncover every carefully hidden secret, every meticulous crime he had committed over decades. "My client doesn't waive any rights," Thomas protested. "I will need to see transfer paperwork, jurisdictional documentation." "It's all been filed," Agent Harlow interrupted. "Your client is implicated in an ongoing federal investigation into organized crime and international weapons trafficking through his association with Alexei Petrov." Vincent's mind raced. Weapons trafficking. What had Alexei been involved in beyond their arrangement? And how much had the Russian revealed about their transaction? "This is the first I'm hearing about weapons charges," Thomas objected. "That's because we have only just connected the dots," Reynolds replied, clearly enjoying Vincent's discomfort. "Turns out your client's merchandise wasn't just illegal, it was military grade. The 50 grand we found, down payment for surface-to-air missiles being smuggled in from Eastern Europe." Vincent's shock was genuine. "That's ridiculous, I never—" "Save it for your federal arraignment," Agent Harlow cut him off. "Officers will escort you to the transport vehicle now." As uniformed officers secured Vincent in handcuffs, Thomas assured him he would arrange representation with federal experience. Vincent barely heard him. His mind was already assessing this new, catastrophic development. Weapons trafficking carried decades in prison, if he avoided the death penalty. The journey to the federal detention center in the state capital passed in a blur of highway scenery and gnawing dread. Vincent was processed efficiently, stripped of his remaining dignity along with his clothing, issued a jumpsuit in harsh prison orange, and placed in a high-security cell block. His new reality consisted of a 7-by-9-foot cell, a steel toilet without privacy, and the constant surveillance of guards who regarded him with the dispassionate contempt reserved for the worst offenders. By evening, word had spread through the facility about the nature of his alleged crimes. Vincent Maddox, the man who had orchestrated his in-laws' deaths, attempted to murder his wife twice, and allegedly dabbled in international weapons smuggling, found himself at the bottom of the prison hierarchy. As night fell over the detention center, Vincent lay on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, calculating his diminishing options. His carefully constructed life had been dismantled with stunning speed. In less than 48 hours, he had gone from respected businessman to federal detainee, awaiting multiple felony charges. Sleep eluded him as his mind replayed every misstep, every miscalculation that had led to this moment. He should have ensured Eleanor was dead before the police arrived. He should have vetted Alexei more thoroughly. He should have moved his assets more discreetly, established more robust contingency plans. Should have. The refrain haunted him through the sleepless night. 3 days later, Vincent sat across from his new attorney, Judith Abernathy, a formidable woman specializing in complex federal cases. Her expression remained neutral as she outlined the government's case against him. "The federal prosecutor has filed a 17-count indictment," she explained, tapping a thick folder. "Conspiracy, attempted murder, wire fraud, money laundering, weapons trafficking, the list goes on. They are offering a deal." Vincent leaned forward. "What kind of deal?" 30 years with possibility of parole after 20, in exchange for your cooperation against Petrov's organization. 30 years. Vincent's voice rose despite his effort to remain composed. "I had be 72 before I had be eligible for parole." Judith's expression didn't change. Consider the alternative. If this goes to trial, you are looking at multiple life sentences without parole. The evidence is substantial, Mr. Maddox. What exactly do they want from me? Information about Petrov's operation, his contacts, the supply chain for the weapons. Judith consulted her notes. They believe you know more than you are admitting. Vincent hesitated. The truth was, he knew almost nothing about Alexei's business beyond their specific arrangement. The weapons allegations had blindsided him completely. And if I don't have that information, then you have nothing to bargain with. Judith's tone was matter-of-fact. There's something else you should know. Your wife regained consciousness yesterday. Vincent's blood ran cold. What? Eleanor Maddox is awake and talking to investigators. According to my sources, her memory of the attack is intact. The final nail in his coffin. If Eleanor could testify about what happened that night, about his hands around her throat, about his explicit statement of intent, any chance of creating reasonable doubt vanished. Has she made a formal statement? Vincent asked, struggling to maintain composure. Not yet. She's still recovering, but the doctors have cleared her for questioning. It's happening this afternoon. Judith studied him carefully. This significantly weakens our position. If you have any information that might be valuable to the prosecution, now is the time to leverage it. Vincent fell silent, mind racing through possibilities. What could he offer that would be valuable enough to secure a better deal? He knew little about Alexei's weapons operation, had no insights into international smuggling networks, but he did know about money, about hidden accounts, shell corporations, the elaborate financial architecture that supported criminal enterprises like Alexei's. Perhaps that knowledge could be his salvation. I might have something, Vincent said carefully. Not about the weapons directly, but about how Petrov moves and hides money. Banking systems, offshore accounts, financial structures. Judith's expression sharpened with interest. That could be valuable. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has been trying to untangle Petrov's money laundering operation for years. I want a better deal, Vincent insisted. 15 years maximum, medium security facility. I will present it to the prosecutor. But don't get your hopes up. Judith gathered her papers. The charges related to your wife and her parents alone carry substantial sentences. After she left, Vincent returned to his cell, weighing his limited options. 15 years would still destroy what remained of his life. But it offered a glimmer of hope, the possibility of freedom while he might still have some years left to enjoy it. As he contemplated this bleak future, a guard appeared at his cell door. Maddox, you have a visitor. Vincent frowned. Judith had just left, and he wasn't expecting anyone else. Thomas wouldn't have made the trip to the federal facility. Who would bother visiting him now? The visitors' area was divided by thick plexiglass partitions, communication facilitated through handsets like old-fashioned telephones. Vincent was led to booth 7, where a figure waited on the other side of the barrier. Lydia. She looked different from when he had last seen her. Harder, her glamorous appearance muted by simple clothing and minimal makeup. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharpness of her features and the coldness in her eyes. Vincent sat slowly, lifting the handset. You came back. Not for you. Lydia's voice was flat, emotionless. For answers. It's complicated, Vincent began, falling back on his practiced charm. There's been a misunderstanding. Stop, Lydia cut him off. I have read the newspaper articles. I have seen the charges. You tried to kill your wife. Twice. Vincent studied her, calculating his approach. Everything I did was for us. For our future. Was it? Lydia leaned closer to the glass. Or was it for you, Vincent? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you have been playing everyone, including me. That's not true. What we had was real. Lydia laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Was it? Let me guess, you planned to do to me exactly what you did to Eleanor eventually. Use me, then discard me when someone better came along. Vincent's silence was damning. That's what I thought. Lydia's expression hardened further. You know what's ironic? If you had just divorced Eleanor like a normal person, paid her a settlement, you could have kept most of your money and your freedom. But you just couldn't stand to part with a single dollar, could you? It wasn't that simple, Vincent protested. Eleanor knew things about her parents, about financial irregularities. A divorce would have exposed everything. So you tried to kill her. Very creative solution. Lydia's sarcasm cut like a blade. Did you kill her parents too? The papers are suggesting you arranged their car accident. Again, Vincent's silence spoke volumes. Lydia shook her head, disgust evident in her expression. You are a monster, Vincent. A cold, calculating monster who values money more than human life. Why did you come here? Vincent asked, his composure finally slipping. To tell me what I already know? To gloat? I came to look you in the eye one last time, Lydia replied. To make sure I never make the mistake of trusting someone like you again. She stood, preparing to leave. Vincent pressed his hand against the plexiglass, sudden desperation breaking through his calculated facade. Wait, I still have resources, accounts the authorities don't know about. I can tell you how to access them. We could still... Goodbye, Vincent. Lydia hung up the handset and turned away without a backward glance, leaving Vincent alone with the crushing weight of his failures. Eleanor Maddox sat in her hospital bed, propped up by pillows, her body still weak but her mind startlingly clear. The room was filled with late afternoon sunlight, casting a golden glow that belied the gravity of the conversation taking place. Detective Reynolds sat in a chair beside her bed, recording device active on the nightstand. Officer Jimenez stood near the door, her presence reassuring in a way Eleanor couldn't quite articulate. Take your time, Mrs. Maddox, Reynolds said gently. Just tell us what you remember from that evening. Eleanor touched the bandage still wrapped around her head, a physical reminder of how close she had come to death. I found evidence in Vincent's study, financial records showing he had stolen my inheritance, correspondence with someone named Lydia, plans to leave the country. Her voice was raspy from the intubation tube, but her words were precise, deliberate. When I confronted him, he attacked me. He put his hands around my throat and told me I had complicated things, that it would be over soon. Reynolds nodded, making notes. And then I managed to grab a letter opener and stab him in the shoulder. That gave me enough time to run to the kitchen and call 911. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly at the memory, but he caught me before I could escape. He hit my head against the counter, then with something heavy, a pan, I think. The forensics team found traces of your blood on a cast-iron skillet, Jimenez confirmed. Eleanor nodded. The last thing I remember clearly is Vincent carrying me toward the cellar stairs. He said it would look like an accident, that I had fallen and broken my neck. And then, Reynolds prompted. Darkness, pain, then nothing until I woke up here. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window, where trees swayed gently in the breeze. A simple beauty she had never fully appreciated until now. The doctors say it's a miracle I survived. Reynolds clicked off the recording device. Your statement matches the physical evidence, Mrs. Maddox. Combined with Mr. Petrov's testimony and the hospital orderly's confession, we have an airtight case against your husband. What happens now? Eleanor asked. Vincent will remain in federal custody pending trial. Given the evidence, a conviction is virtually certain. Reynolds hesitated. There's something else you should know. The investigation has uncovered evidence suggesting Vincent may have been responsible for your parents' accident 15 years ago. Eleanor closed her eyes as a wave of grief and rage washed over her. Somehow she had always known, had sensed on some subconscious level, that her parents' deaths hadn't been random tragedy. The timing had been too convenient, Vincent entering her life shortly after she had inherited their estate. He married me for money, she said softly. Everything, Every moment of our life together was a calculation. "I'm sorry," Reynolds said, and the simple sincerity in his voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. After the detectives left, Eleanor sat alone in the gathering twilight, contemplating the shattered remains of her life. 7 years married to a man who had likely murdered her parents, who had certainly tried to murder her twice. 7 years of manipulation, isolation, and carefully orchestrated control. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Ramirez entered, followed by a tall woman in a crisp suit. "Mrs. Maddox, this is Ms. Ortega from the district attorney's office," Dr. Ramirez explained. "She had like to speak with you if you are feeling up to it." Eleanor nodded, straightening against her pillows. "Of course." Ms. Ortega took the chair Reynolds had vacated, her expression professionally compassionate. "Mrs. Maddox, I won't take much of your time. I know you are still recovering. I wanted to update you personally on your husband's case." "Ex-husband," Eleanor corrected firmly. "I have instructed my attorney to file for divorce immediately." Ms. Ortega nodded. "Of course, Vincent Maddox has agreed to a plea deal with federal prosecutors. In exchange for information about Alexei Petrov's financial operations, he will plead guilty to reduced charges." Eleanor's heart sank. "Reduced? What does that mean?" 25 years minimum, Mrs. Maddox. "No possibility of parole before he serves at least 20. He will be in his 60s before he's eligible for release. And the charges related to my parents? Included in the plea. He's admitted to arranging the tampering with their vehicle's brake lines." Ms. Ortega's expression softened slightly. "He won't ever hurt anyone again, Mrs. Maddox. I promise you that." After Ms. Ortega departed, Eleanor asked Dr. Ramirez for privacy. Alone in the deepening shadows of her hospital room, she finally allowed herself to weep for her parents, for the years stolen from her, for the life she had lived in the shadow of a monster without recognizing the danger. When the tears finally subsided, Eleanor felt something unexpected stirring within her. Not just grief or anger, but resolve. She had survived, despite Vincent's meticulous planning, despite his ruthless determination. She had lived, and now she had a chance to reclaim her life, to rebuild from the ashes of his betrayal. 1 year later, the Lake Blackwater Women's Shelter stood on the edge of town, a Victorian house renovated with security in mind, reinforced doors, secure windows, discreet surveillance cameras. The building had once been a symbol of wealth and status. Now it served a more vital purpose, providing safe haven for women escaping domestic violence. Eleanor Maddox, now Eleanor Thornhill again, reclaiming her family name, stood on the shelter's wide porch, watching as a moving truck delivered furniture for the facility's new wing. The expansion would add 8 more bedrooms, allowing the shelter to help more women and children in crisis. The bunk beds for the children's rooms just arrived, Diane Fisher reported, joining Eleanor on the porch. After Eleanor's recovery, she had reconnected with her old friend, who had indeed moved to Arizona, but returned immediately when she learned of Eleanor's accident. "Perfect timing," Eleanor replied. "The painters finished the children's area yesterday." Eleanor surveyed the property with quiet satisfaction. When she had finally gained access to her inheritance, the money Vincent had hidden in offshore accounts, she had made an immediate decision. Rather than keep the funds tainted as they were by her parents' blood, she had established a foundation in their memory. The Thornhill Foundation's first project had been purchasing and renovating this shelter. "The first families move in next week," Diane continued. "The waiting list is already full." Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. Lakeview's picturesque exterior had always concealed darker truths: domestic violence, coercive control, financial abuse, problems that existed everywhere but flourished in isolation. "The support group starts tomorrow night," Eleanor reminded her friend. "I have finally finished the presentation." In addition to funding the shelter, Eleanor had become its most passionate advocate, sharing her story with other survivors. The physical scars had healed, the skull fracture, The broken ribs, the bruises around her throat. The emotional wounds would take longer, but helping others provided its own kind of healing. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text message from her attorney. Vincent's appeal had been denied. His conviction stood 25 years in federal prison for the attempted murder of his wife, the murder of her parents, and financial crimes spanning decades. Eleanor slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Vincent Maddox belonged to her past. Her focus remained firmly on the present, on rebuilding her life and helping others reclaim theirs. "Penny for your thoughts?" Diane asked, noting Eleanor's momentary distraction. Eleanor smiled, genuine warmth replacing the shadows in her eyes. "Just thinking about how far we have come. A year ago, I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. Now look at all this." She gestured toward the shelter, the new wing, the gardens planted by volunteers. "You are the strongest person I know," Diane said simply. Eleanor shook her head. "Not strong, just determined. There's a difference." As twilight descended over Lake Blackwater, Eleanor remained on the porch, watching as the shelter's security lights activated automatically. Each light represented safety, protection, vigilance, concepts she would never again take for granted. In a maximum security federal prison, 500 miles away, Vincent Maddox stared at the concrete walls of his cell, contemplating the decades stretching before him. His carefully constructed empire had crumbled, his meticulously planned escape thwarted. The man who had once controlled every aspect of his environment now found himself stripped of all authority, all autonomy. And in a small town by a mist-shrouded lake, the woman he had failed to kill twice began each day with the quiet certainty that she had survived not just Vincent's violence, but his most insidious weapon, the belief he had instilled in her that she was powerless, dependent, trapped. Eleanor Thornhill was none of those things. She had emerged from the darkness Vincent had created, carrying with her a hard-won wisdom and an unshakable purpose. The monster who had haunted her life remained safely caged, while she stood beneath an open sky, free to forge a new path forward. One step, one day, one rescued soul at a time. The killer husband had realized his wife was still breathing. What he hadn't realized was the power that breath would carry, the strength to survive, to testify, to rebuild, to thrive. In the end, that oversight had been his greatest miscalculation of all.